بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Peace be upon you all. Alhamdulillah, we are here with Ubaydullah Evans for our beautiful class, which is on the three themes of Ramadan. We've covered mercy, we've covered forgiveness, and now we're covering emancipation, or if you will, salvation, or if you will, freedom, inshallah. Alhamdulillah, we're here today, uh, ready to go. Please, any way, shape, or form that you could support Ta'leef, please do so. And at the same time, check out all the events, all of the things that we have going on so far. A little quick shout out to a thing we're doing this weekend. It's Ta'leef care packages, which is basically we're jumping on Ta'leef meals back and doing a Ramadan edition on that. And this weekend we'll be passing out for anybody who is in a position where they need a Ta'leef Ramadan package to come through to the space, and from their car they'll be given a beautiful package. Alhamdulillah, our volunteers have been working on that, and there's a lot of nice things in that package. I'm not gonna lie, uh, including I believe like a $25 gift card for folks that come through. Other stuff that are essential for Ramadan. Obviously, we are coming to the last days of Ramadan. We're not there yet of the last 10 days, but we're very close. I believe today is the 19th day, which means tonight is the 20th night, which means Wednesday would be the beginning of that evening, that night when Maghrib hits, when the sunset prayer hits. That evening will be the actual last 10 nights of Ramadan, in which there's Laylatul Qadr, which is there's the night of power, the night of decree. Inshallah, may we all witness that. And those days and those nights, those will be the nights and days of freedom. So with further ado, inshallah, we'll be starting the program with Ubaydullah Evans, and the topic today is emancipation. Sidi Ubaid, how you doing?
Alhamdulillah, man, I'm well, man. Always, better than I was last week. Mashallah, people that are close to me, my beloved and dear friend Amir Taf, he called me and said, "Man, are you okay?" Because you really seemed like you were fading there toward the end of the program. So, alhamdulillah, I did not run this morning, and I think I'm a lot more, I think I'm a lot stronger than I was last week. So this should be an interesting conversation, inshallah. And I really hope that we end up having a conversation. We can have an exchange. Would you like me to give some preliminary ideas?
Yeah, please always start us out, and then we'll go from there, inshallah.
Bismillah.
It's beautiful to get that, gets the thing rolling.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونستهديه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا فمن يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله ثم ما بعد. Alhamdulillah. We've covered the different themes of Ramadan as correspond to the thirds of Ramadan, the first 10 being Rahmah, the second 10 days, that is, being days of forgiveness. And now we're entering the section of the series that you titled Emancipation. And when you think about emancipation in this context, we are talking about nothing other than salvation. Salvation. And salvation, believe it or not, is something that many religious people have become uncomfortable speaking about. Because when you talk about salvation, you must talk about the possibility of damnation, the possibility of perdition, the possibility of retribution, the possibility of hell. And, it's strange, one Christian commentator was lamenting that in all of the contemporary kind of televangelist discourse around Christianity, there are two concepts and two words that never come up. One is sin. You don't talk about sin, right? Right? You can talk about indiscretion. You can talk about misjudgment. You can talk about uh, mistakes, faux pas, kerfuffles, you know, but you don't talk about sin, because sin has in it a connotation of evil, something that is not just merely a misjudgment or an indiscretion. It's something that is existentially evil that one has done. And the second concept related to sin, you don't talk about hell. You don't talk about punishment. And one of the essential roles of the Prophet ﷺ is the Nadir. His function as the Messenger of God ﷺ is divided really into two sub-functions. One is the Bashir, the one that gives the Bushra, the glad tiding, the one that informs people doing good deeds that if you persist in these good deeds, the end for you will be felicity. The end for you will be paradise. The end for you will be happiness. And he also functions as the Nadir, the warner. And the warning is something that emanates from mercy. Warning people that if you persist in evil, if you persist in sin, if you persist in disbelief, the end is retribution. The end is damnation. The end is perdition. And if we just allow ourselves to feel our mortality, right? Feel it, like sit with it, be present with it. And, there's a good book that I would recommend to, everyone. It's called The Denial of Death. It's by a writer named Ernest Becker. He used to teach anthropology at Syracuse. And his basic thesis is that human beings are involved in different levels of expressing existential dread about their mortality. All human beings are concerned about what is going to happen to them when they die, right? Whether they're pretending as though it does not bother them. He says it's impossible for someone not to be haunted by, facing, or the idea of facing, the great unknown. That this is something that binds us, as a species. This is something, because we are uniquely conscious beings who can conceptualize infinity. What does that mean? What does it mean to be gone? What does it mean to die? What does it mean to traverse from this realm to an unknown realm? That is something that circumscribes our existence. That we're always thinking about that. And he says, this is Ernest Becker, not a Muslim writer. He says, the goal of the human experience is to find some kind of salvation, to find something that will provide salvation. Now, he says people are seeking salvation at different levels, right? Some people just want cosmic heroism, just to be remembered, to be, as being a good person. Some people want valor, right? To be remembered as someone who gave their life for a worthwhile cause. Some people want heaven, right? They actually want a guarantee, a promise that when this life ends, if they live correctly, morally, well, righteously, they will be given paradise, right? So this concern, this is not a strictly religious concern. This is a human concern. And one of the beautiful things about the month of Ramadan is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala goes straight to what we're concerned about, right? And you see, there's mercy, there's forgiveness, And if you don't make the connection, what mercy and forgiveness result in is salvation. That on that day that Allah Ta'ala says will make children gray haired, on that day when people will literally be drowning in their perspiration, on that day when everybody will be terrified, right? In mughman alay, yani, almost in a state of delirium. Allah has said that fasting in the month of Ramadan will provide you with a shield, will provide you with some protection, will give you the salvation that you so desperately seek. And this is something we should be rejoicing about, that there's rahmah, there's maghfirah, and then there's salvation from the fire. There's emancipation from the fire. So, just some preliminary ideas. If I were to, try and summarize, I guess what I'm trying to open with is that concern about the eternal state of our souls is something that we share. It's something that we should all be thinking about. It's something that is worth being consumed about. And it's just the good favor of God that for such a simple act, fasting, just refraining from your food and your drink and your spousal relations, God will grant you protection, grant you salvation from that kind of an ending. It also says something to us about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Um, you know, um, uh, having a good opinion of Allah, husn dhan billah, is, the Prophet ﷺ described husn dhan billah wa husn dhan bil mu'mineen as the wings of faith, right? Janahatan, yani, the wings of faith, right? The things that give faith the ability to take flight. And when we're thinking about Ramadan and Allah Ta'ala literally tipping the scale in our direction so that we can gain His pleasure, we can earn His forgiveness, we can experience His rahmah, and we can be given salvation, this should inspire us with a good opinion of our Lord. That Allah Ta'ala is literally setting things up so that we can be forgiven, not setting things up so that we can be punished, right? And His mercy encompasses all things. So I'm extremely humbled and extremely inspired at the possibility of gaining salvation, in these last, 10 days.
Like in the last statement that you said, I'm extremely inspired to receiving salvation these last 10 days. I know for everyone it's relatively easy. They think, yeah, we're getting salvation from the hellfire, right?
Mhm.
Freedom from the hellfire. But really, what does that mean, Ubayd? Like, what is, a lot of people might think, hellfire is just a theoretical thing, right? Or
Mm.
hellfire is a real thing, but we really have no idea what that really means.
يوم يقول لجهنم هل امتلأت وتقول هل من مزيد. قال الله سبحانه وتعالى, the day that we say to the fire, are you full? And the fire responds, is there any more? Right? Hell. And yes, I think it's worth mentioning that you do have some opinions in the Islamic tradition, about the eternality of hell. Is hell forever? With people that you probably wouldn't guess, taking the position that if Allah wanted to, He could put everyone in Jannah, and that would not be a violation of His adl. That would not be a violation of His justice. Ibn Taymiyyah was of that position. that if he wanted to, it wouldn't be a violation of adl. It wouldn't be a violation of justice. However, when we think about the possibility of divine chastisement, there's a way we have to conceptualize it. It's not, you know, when we talk about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as being Arhamar Rahimin, the most merciful of those who show mercy, that none can be more merciful. There is no one that shows more mercy than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If someone is made to face chastisement after death, it will only be because they were completely deserving of that, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says there will be no dhulm, there will be no injustice on the day of judgment. Everybody will be requited, no one will be requited for their deeds in an unjust way, right? What that means is that the punishment would fit the crime. If you're thinking about a person entering hell, billah, the punishment would fit the crime. So what, it's kind of hard to reset, because yes, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is clement. Clemency is a defining characteristic of God. And in spite of that, if someone al-ishraku billah, associated a partner with God in his divinity, or if someone downright failed to acknowledge his lordship, all of these would be crimes that would justify punishment, right? Sin that we commit, right, without repenting, we have to begin to understand them as crimes that would justify punishment. So in fasting in the month of Ramadan, we're not talking about salvation from some theoretical concept. We're talking about bodily chastisement that is due to people that disobey God, but being spared of that bodily chastisement because of this act of devotion that we're performing in fasting.
Now, going into the realities, the reason why I'm thinking just a little bit, and you let me know if the thought process is correct or not, but most people need to know what reality they're in first for them to actually be able to be freed from it. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why I try to understand for myself, like, what what's the reality of the health factor, right? Or what's the reality of heaven as well? Because as a human being, it has to be something that's a little bit tangible for me, right?
Yeah, Bismillah. No, and I think this is one of the great blessings of the Quranic revelation, is that it doesn't make heaven or hell nondescript or bland. Hell is described as a fire whose fuel is men and stones. It is described as a foul smelling place. It is described as a place that contains horrors. This is, and it's not that hasha lillah, God would take any sadistic pleasure in torturing or punishing people. But again, these are punishments that correspond to acts of disbelief that people do perform. And so when you're thinking about hell, think about the most unpleasant circumstance that you could imagine, right, in the life of this world. And then, try to think about that being exponentially more unpleasant, right? Ibn Ata'illah, in his own very unique way, only Ibn Ata'illah, and perhaps others, but I'm more familiar with his writings. He said, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ihtajaba, veiled himself from the people of Jannah, ma taba lahum na'im, they wouldn't, none of the pleasures of Jannah would mean anything to them, right? And then he says, wa idha tajalla, if he made himself manifest to the people of Jahannam, they would not sense any of the pain of Jahannam, right? Just because of the tajalliyat. See, I know this is the stuff that you're looking for, the Sufi stuff. I see, mashallah. I can tell.
I'm not, but I'll be honest, like my heart just inclines towards that. The reality of what you're saying is human beings have different degrees of being informed about the garden to incentivize them, right? So
Right,
some
right.
people, it's like tijara for them. If I do this, then I get this, right?
Yeah. No, I
Some
understand. I
people,
understand.
some people, it's sexuality, right? Let's just be real. Some people, it's
Yeah,
sexuality.
sure. No, I
Others,
understand.
right? But what you just said was basically like, if you're a child, and you never got to engage with one of your parents, but you know that your parent existed somewhere in this world and still exists, but you never had the opportunity to engage with that parent because that parent left you or circumstances or whatnot.
Mhm.
But you going through this world, your whole life, not being able to gaze upon that parent at least once, that's torture. So imagine eternity without knowing that your creator is right over there, but you're veiled from him.
Yeah, no. I mean, and so, Ibn Ata'illah, he said, just to, continue, he just said that, and if Allah Ta'ala was made manifest to the people of Jahannam, they would not sense, they would have no ihsas of pain or displeasure. He said, so really, Jannah and Jahannam are just about proximity to Allah. That's it, right? Jannah is about proximity to Allah, and Jahannam is about distance from Allah. And that's what they say, akhtir al-jar or al-jar qabl al-dar. Choose the neighbor before you choose the dwelling, right? Choose the neighbor before you choose the dwelling. So, yeah, I mean, so for those that that have that turn of mind, and for whom that kind of thinking is possible, think about Jahannam, conceptualize it as just complete distance and removal from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? And so maybe for them, it's not serpents and the smell of pus and separation and heat and fire and torturous horrors. None of that perhaps is any tarheeb for them. None of that is disagreeable enough to move them to want to be saved. But if you say it's bu'd anillah, it's distance from Allah, then maybe that is the thing that helps them to conceptualize Jahannam. But we have to, the mukhataba is ala qadri uqulihim. For me, and perhaps this highlights the ways in which I'm a simpleton. If you just describe it as a place that's hot, no, we shouldn't be laughing. It's not, it's not funny. It's not funny. If you describe it as a place that's hot and that there's a foul stench and that is contained of unspeakable horrors, that's enough for me to know I don't want to go there. So maybe in that way, natural theology is still quite appealing to me.
No,
It's quite impactful for me.
I feel it's like what I believe it's Muhammad Ali said, I used to carry a lighter in my pocket, and every time I thought about doing something bad, I would just put it underneath my hand and be like, "See, you can't even hold it for like 10 seconds. How are you gonna?"
Yeah, no, no. I mean, and see, and that's the other thing too. I mean, not to take this discussion in a different direction, but I think, I mean, some of those perspectives, I mean, I appreciate them, right? I appreciate them. I appreciate people that, are not inspired by the delights of heaven. Who cares about silk-lined cushions and, silken garments and delectable food, and great companionship and space and wine that does not befuddle the mind. Who cares about any of that? And sometimes I'm looking like,
I
me?
do. I do. I do.
You know what I'm saying?
For sure. Yeah.
Maybe, and perhaps, I mean, and don't get me wrong, I don't want to, I do not intend to make a mockery of the state of the muqarrabun, the people that are, close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that perhaps really are not inspired by those things, nor are they frightened by descriptions of hell. The only thing they hear is closeness to Allah and distance from Allah, right? Pleasure or being pleasing to Allah and being displeasing to Allah. And perhaps for me, it just it's humbling, and it lets me know that I have quite a ways to go in um, my worship of my Lord. Because right now, descriptions of heaven are still very enticing, mashallah, and descriptions of hell are still very frightening.
Yeah, I feel you. I'm on the same boat, 100%. And I think that's the thing, you traverse through life. And I think Ubayd, you even as a person who took their shahada, what, you were 18 years old, right?
16 going on 17.
Okay, 16. You're in your
Uh,
teens. You're in your
I was a
teens,
teen.
right?
I was a teenager, though, yeah.
And
Uh,
so traversing through right from that point on to now, I'm sure there's different times in your life where you're looking at the description of the hellfire or heaven, and there's been different times in your life where it was different motivators.
well, actually, man, the motivators have been pretty consistent. I think as I've gotten older, um, I've sought more clarification on just salvation, and as you meet just good people that are not Muslim, who don't subscribe to the tenets of Islam in the way that we do, and just thinking about them and being concerned about them just at a human level. I mean, I know that I can never have more concern for them or more love for them or more care for them than their creator, right? But
Hmm.
I think, salvific exclusivity is actually the proper term.
What was that
Um,
again? Can you repeat that again? What was that?
Man, wait, man, you laughing at me, B, man,
No,
you
I'm
laughing at
serious.
me, man.
I'm laughing because I'm in love with what you just said. I felt like you just said something in French to me. I'm not even sure.
Man, come on,
No,
Ali, man, you trying to make a fool of the brother, man.
never then. Ever, never.
No, no, no,
Impossible.
no. Salvific exclusivity. Salvific exclusivity is the idea that Muslims believe that only Muslims will go to heaven, or Christians believe only Christians will go to heaven,
Mm-hmm.
or Jewish people believe only Jews will go to heaven, right? And yes, we know post, I mean, we know pre risala of the Prophet ﷺ, there are many different prophetic dispensations that perhaps only resembled Islam in their emphasis of Tawheed, but everything else might have been different, right? And we know that those people would definitely qualify, could be qualified as believers. But I'm thinking post risala, post ba'atha, we think, how, I found myself concerned about that. And even though I have some training, and I tell myself, should I be concerned about it? And it's really not my business. And I don't know about anyone's eternal fate, and I should really only be concerned with my own. And yeah, I've given myself those pep talks, but I still found myself thinking about that my sweet neighbor, the sweet old lady, a very Christian woman, and just how inspiring her walk of faith is, and thinking to myself, subhanallah, what does that, what does that mean? What will that mean, for her? And I just find myself, just, at the level of human community, just being concerned about, certain people, relatives, colleagues. Well, all my colleagues are Muslim, but it just, relatives, neighbors, friends, just being concerned about them in that way.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but that you brought up a good fact, and it's one thing that I deal with a lot of folk when they come into the tradition. I tell them like, hey, you uh, understand that taking the shahada um, doesn't mean it's a free pass into the garden, right? Like that's not. We don't believe that you've been saved taking the shahada, or the
I,
testimony.
yeah, no, actually, I've looked at lots of different things, with regard, and this is one of those things that, subhanallah, would be of much more interest to a convert than it would someone from a Muslim family. Like someone from a Muslim family, this might be like, making dua for the non-Muslim mota, making dua for non-Muslim deceased. Uh, for someone that's born into a Muslim family, that really just might be like a theoretical thing. Unless except like when Kobe passed away, people like really came to me like, yo, that I do.
It's
Yeah, I'm not
true.
laughing.
It's
It's not
true.
funny. It's not
It's
funny. It's
true.
not funny. People like, yo, can we make dua for Kobe?
It's true.
And and I remember thinking, like, okay, Kobe Bryant, inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. And and in a sense, we grew up with Kobe Bryant. He was like one of the first athlete. He was like an athlete whose career coincided with the TMZ era, like this, like unrestricted celebrity access. So Kobe really felt more like a neighbor or like a colleague or like a friend or a co-worker to people. And so I understood this outpouring of concern for Kobe. I didn't think of it as frivolous or silly, but I did say, some people have to ask that question about their grandmother, their grandfather, their mother,
Their mother-in-law.
their mother-in-law, their father. Can you imagine? Like there were some Muslims that really experienced, I won't call it an existential crisis, but this thing with like praying for Kobe was like a big thing, man. You know what I'm saying? And I was just kind of thinking, I never said it because I didn't want to belittle their, grief. But can you imagine like that same dilemma? But we're talking about mom, bro. We're talking about dad. We're talking about Uncle Mike. We're talking about, Auntie Pamela. This is like for real for some people. So um uh being a convert and perhaps having more connection to people that don't outwardly subscribe to the Islamic faith, this has been something that I've, looked at and explored and pressed, different scholars and grilled people because I really wanted to know about. And there's a lot of cool stuff out there. One thing that uh, always gives me some solace is the statement of Sayyidina Umar, "Umirna an nahkum ala dhahir." We have been commanded to judge in accordance with the outward. So when we talk about somebody being Muslim or non-Muslim, for that matter, we're only talking about what is apparent from their state. When we talk about people being Muslim, we're really talking about legal designations, like should they be buried in the cemetery of the Muslims? Is returning their salam wajib? Can they marry my daughter? Like that's what we're really talking about, right? In terms of the salvific quality of Islam, only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has access to that, right? Only God knows that. So in the same way that you have the munafiq, someone that is legally Muslim, but في الدرك الأسفل من النار, in terms of their salvation, in the lowest level of the hellfire, but legally, this person is Muslim.
Yeah.
right? The opposite also exists.
Exactly.
Someone that is
Exactly.
outwardly non-Muslim,
Exactly.
but perhaps inwardly the person is Muslim, right? That was one thing that was like, subhanAllah. Then you also have that conversation between Christ alayhi salam and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on Qiyamah, in which Jesus says, فَإِن تُعَذِّبْهُمْ فَإِنَّهُمْ عِبَادُكَ. If you punish them, then they are your servants. وَإِن تَغْفِرْ لَهُمْ فَإِنَّكَ أَنْتَ الْعَزِيزُ الْحَكِيمُ أو كما قال subhanahu wa ta'ala. But if you forgive them, then truly you are mighty and wise. And that a lot of the mufassirun say that this statement from Christ alayhi salam is in a sense a dua. If you in tazfir lahum, if
No.
you forgive them, there is no messenger of God that appeals Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala like that unless his hope is for forgiveness. In tazfir lahum, if you forgive them, right? And some people saying this sigha, this way is a way that we can pray for, because Allah Ta'ala wouldn't include it in the Quran, and certainly not on the lips of one of the ulul azm, the possessors of great resolve, if it was something we could not do for ourselves, right? If it was not something that is yuqtada bi, something that could be followed, right? So some people say that you can say about a non-Muslim that passes, this person is your servant, and if you choose to punish them, then they're your servant. But if you choose to have mercy on them, Ya Rabbul Alameen, innaka antal azizul hakim, you are
Yeah.
mighty and you are wise. And
Yeah.
that also provided me with a great deal of solace.
Yeah, I mean, like you took the conversation basically to a reality that's very deep for me. But before I really get into that, because when I think of the emancipation process, I think about like what am I trying to get emancipated from, right? And then I
Mm,
get and then I get and then I get into the second layer after that, which you already brought up, the scenarios of the day of judgment, right?
mhm,
The scenarios
mhm,
of the day of judgment, which is different than the abode, right? Which is different than
mhm,
where you end up.
mhm.
Also, the scenarios of being in the grave. That's basically my mindset. But I'm gonna put pause on that for 1 second because you said something that just reminded me, and I'll go right back to it right after. But you said something that just reminded me that I think you can add to it. Is like when the Prophet ﷺ stood up for the 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 the, the Jewish funeral,
Mhm.
right? Is it not?
هي ليس هي ليست نفس
Nah,
هي
is it
ليست نفس.
exactly? Is
Mm,
it not a soul? Is it not a
mhm,
human being, right? And that's one thing. The other thing that you remind me of is when one of the companions would say to another companion, I believe I forget the names of the two, but they're well
mhm,
known. I mean, a tabir to a companion, he would say, and like, what would La ilaha illallah serve them at that point if that's all they knew? Right? If that's all they knew, what would, and then the companion would just stay quiet until he asked him 3 times. Then he would say it would enter them into the garden, meaning that there's
mm.
like a reality here where you're always tried on the amount of knowledge and access that you actually get um, from the truth of Islam, right? So like,
Yeah, it's that. I mean, that's clear. Actually, that's a mainstream Sunni um, theological position for the Asha'ira and the Maturidiyah. That if a person does not hear anything about the Prophet ﷺ, right, does never hears about Islam, there can be no hisab. It's almost like لم تقم عليهم الحجة. They don't have that burden of they don't have the burden of testifying to the truth because they've never heard of the truth, right? So people that have never, and then many contemporary scholars actually extend that to people who only hear misinformation about the Prophet,
yeah, like if you just listening to Fox News all day about the process.
right? If you only hear how can you be expected to embrace a message that you've only been misinformed about? I actually would think, and this is what's scary for me is that I'm a Black American. What's scary for me is I'm a Black American. And I don't know, man. It's like African Americans ممكن أقيمت عليهم الحجة. ممكن. African Americans have a very close relationship with Islam. It's different than, say, white Americans or Hispanic Americans. It's different. I think that I would even extend that to say, can a person be expected to accept Islam if they can't really see it as, it's almost like for a lot of Americans, Islam is beyond the purview of consideration. It's like they don't even see it as something they could be, like Muslim, right? And my thing is, how would that impact their judgment, right? They don't even see Islam as something they could even like Muslim. Like they just have never received da'wah in a culturally relevant way, in a way that would suggest like, no, this is something that you must consider, right? And the way you respond to this invitation has very, very serious consequences for your fate. No, most of them are, I think a lot of, white Americans especially, and even Latino Americans, they come into contact with Islam as, these horrifying images and these parodies that you see on television. And I don't even think that they even began to even think that they should consider it. And inshallah, that'll be a source of mercy, for them. But like I said, I'm African American, so what I'm saying, it might, I think sometimes, we talk about, African Americans and the special relationship with Islam, but we don't talk about the other side of that. That if that relationship is as special as the history would suggest, then is there any excuse, right? Is there any excuse? Wallahu ta'ala alam. And of course, we pray for maghfirah.
Yeah, and
Pray for mercy.
I'm just gonna add this real quick. I know a lot of Moroccan scholars. That when you tell them someone passes, they'll just say rahmatullah alayh right away. They're not even asking if that dude's Muslim or not. They just say it.
Well, I think the important thing about that of course those ayat of the Quran, most mufassirun see them as being occasioned by the passing of Abu Talib, right? And something that just intuitively makes sense to me is this isn't about wanting to see anybody punished. Hashalillah. No, it's not about wanting to see anyone punished. No, of course not. That's I would hope that we would regard something like that as absurd, that you'd want to see somebody punished eternally in hell. No, of course not. What I think the ruling is really about is how do you relate to kufr? How you, right? Not the person that is deceased. Their book is closed, right? But how you yourself relate to disbelief is what I think the real issue is there. So do you see disbelief as, like the Prophet ﷺ said, a person that tastes the sweetness, the halawa of iman, they would hate returning to a state of disbelief like a person would hate being thrown into a fire? Or do you see disbelief as something that, it's not so bad? You can still, you don't have to be a believer to be a good person. You don't have to be, you don't have to be a follower of Islam, strictly speaking, to be a God-pleasing or morally upright person. And that if you begin to internalize, if you begin to internalize that, right? If you begin to internalize that, what will that mean for your adherence to the faith? That's what it's really about, bro. It's not about wanting to see anybody punished. Actually, that it's about if I begin to internalize this idea that, Muslim, non-Muslim. I mean, if you're a good person, what will that mean for my iltizam? That's what I think is really at issue there.
Yeah.
And that's something to think about. You know what I'm saying?
So the what I mentioned earlier is I'm getting back to is when we for me personally, I started thinking about, like I said before, like what are we getting emancipated from to get a visual, an idea, a feel, a
Mm,
tangible thing, right?
mm,
Because that either lights a certain love in your heart to move towards something, or a certain fear, maybe, or a certain hope, like you said, the two wings, the hope and fear that we fly off of as
mhm,
Muslims.
mhm,
But the second thing that comes to me is then that day, and you mentioned it almost beautifully, because that day a lot of things transpire, which is the day of the Sa'a, the real day of judgment.
mm,
Because everybody has a minor Sa'a where they pass away. That's their Sa'a. Or even
mm.
sometimes communities have their own Sa'a, which is like the Prophet ﷺ used to say,
Right.
when this person passes away, that's when that whole generation is done with, right? Meaning
Mm,
like they also had a Sa'a, they also had their, but then there's Sa'at
mm.
al-Kubra, and that's the one that's usually referenced in the Quran, which is like the actual hour, the real.
Yeah, the thing that I think about most, I mean, you have the um, all of this, the very vivid scenes um, that are depicted in the Quran about Qiyamah, about judgment. Everything from women miscarrying to children growing gray haired to Yawma yafirru mar'u min akhi wa ummihi wa abi, people fleeing from their brother and their mother and their father and their spouse, and the earth, kind of the expanse of the earth being rolled up, the mountains um, being rent asunder, right? Rent asunder. What am I? I'm talking like I'm a Victorian poet.
There we
The
go. Like
mountains
last week, what we said: if you're Muslim, you use terminology that rend
rent
asunder.
asunder. The mountains being smashed to bits. There you go. A nice contemporary translation. Um, all of those things are, shocking, right? All of those things. People, drowning in perspiration and things of that nature. Those things are all shocking. But the thing that is most shocking to me is perceiving the relativity of time in that moment.
Yes.
That when you think about infinitude, right, or infinity, yeah, I mean, they make nice cars, and no, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. We don't have. I mean, we really, beyond the automotive manufacturer, we really don't have a concept of infinity. I mean, we can say something that goes on forever, but how can beings that are completely temporal? I mean, everything about us is contingent. Everything about us is temporal. You know, as we attempt to contemplate infinity, it's like, what does it mean? But when God says that it will make life seem like yawman al ba'da yawm, a day or part of the day, that really drives it home. That when you are standing and you're thinking about your eternal fate, right? It will make your entire, if Allah asks you, you know, how long, right? How long was your time on earth, right? How long did you tarry in the earth? No, but how long was your time on earth? Yawman al ba'da yawm, a day or part of the day. Subhanallah, right? And this could be a person that lived, 85 or 90 years.
Yeah.
But when you look, when you're looking at eternity, what's 85 or 90 years, right? Allah Ta'ala talks about, days that are 10,000, or hours that are 10,000 days you're reckoning. What does that, what does that mean? And I think that just thinking about Qiyamah as forever, maybe the best one to talk about it has been, that great, American poet, Andre Benjamin, who said, forever, forever, ever, forever, ever. you know, Obviously, mashallah, I'm in a very good mood. Forgive me, indulge me, indulge me, indulge me. I think there's some effervescence from my fasting that I'm in a very good mood. But no, I mean thinking about forever is that's always enough for me, right? Forever, subhanallah, forever. That in and of itself is enough for tarheeb. Just thinking about eternity. Whew, and so salvation on that day, protection on that day, shade on that day, right? Steadfastness, right? Thubut, on that day. This is what we want, inshallah.
Yeah, that's what I believe. That puts things in perspective for me a lot. And then what I end up with is putting that in perspective. Now the question that everyone always asks and everyone tries to wonder about is like, okay, I fasted my Ramadan. Uh, thanks to this program, now we have a perspective of hell and heaven and what emancipation is about, and a little bit about where we're going in traversing the path on that day and how severe it is. But how do I know that I actually won my freedom here? How do I know that I actually was emancipated here?
We need a whole. If somebody wants to teach, I think a really beneficial course, and I can think of someone, I can think of a few people that I think have the requisite skills to teach a course like this. We really just need some instruction in how to engage with speech about God, speech about religion, speech about the akhirah. I think we have become such technocrats in our understandings of things. And this is why, some people say that, traditional usage of language pre-scientific revolution was actually much richer. That the scientific revolution, it gave us great insights in terms of science and technology, but it really dwarfed our experience of the richness of language. We don't speak in as rich a way as we used to. We want everything to be technical. So, we ask questions like, so if I did this, does that mean that I'm going to heaven now? So does that mean I don't have to pray anymore? Does that mean, it's like if we hear that an action is cursed, we have this, so that means that if I get a tattoo, I'm going to hell? Is that what that, and it's like the, revelatory speech is richer than that. It's not to be, how can I say this? It's not, because I'm not saying that it's not absolutely true, but these are to provide like vistas for the soul so that you can see the fadila of something. You can see the virtue of doing something. It's not meant to be taken as, it's not like, okay, I fast the last 10 days of Ramadan. I didn't fast the first 20, but since the last 10 get me out of hell, I guess I'm good. The strange, the strangest thing that I've heard in that regard, I was talking to a brother, right? This is a true story, Ali. And we were talking about that the sayyi'ah, the demerit, the spiritual sayyi'ah, the demerit. You do something wrong, and it's recorded for you as a bad deed, a sayyi'ah.
Yeah.
It's only recorded once.
Once, a single one, yeah.
But the good deeds, ashura ad'af, or ashura, amthal, they're multiplied, right? So God said, so that means if I go out and I cheat on my wife, but then I give some sadaqah, I'm 9 up. I said,
Talk
no,
about
that,
being technical. Talk about being technical.
but this is what this is, there's something in, I mean, and he wasn't being silly, by the way, but there's something in the a modern understanding that inclines toward that kind of calculus. Wait,
Like
so like
tit for
you
tat.
mean
Tit for
you
tat.
mean you mean to say what and it's like you missed the intention of the speech act. The speech act is that hadith of the Prophet is simply to talk about what the mercy of God, and it should inspire us with a good opinion of God, because God has arranged accountability in a way that prefers you. God has arranged accountability in a way that intends to confer an advantage upon you and not a disadvantage. And that is the truth that should just sit in your soul, right? It's not to be even taken and like, so that means it's not, that's that's not it. That's not the way to countenance revelatory speech. Like that's not like that's just not it. So when you hear that fasting in the last 10 days of Ramadan uh, um, is it's in terms of, we will be utaqa, we will be liberated from the fire, right? What we really should take from that is the immense fadl, the immense favor that God has put into these days. That's what it's and that does not mean that the statement is hyperbole. No, no. The statement is expressive of a reality, but that reality must is existing with other realities, right? Other verities of faith, and all of them exist together. So just talking about the favor of the last 10 days of Ramadan, that just those 10 days of Ramadan are worth salvation from eternal fire. So fast those 10 days of Ramadan and do so increasing your good deeds and increasing your qira'ah and increasing your dhikr. It's just like raka'atay al-fajr khayrun min ad-dunya wa ma fiha. Right? The 2 raka'ah of fajr are better than the dunya and everything in the dunya. قال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم في حديث صحيح, in an authentic hadith. It's not to be taken as, wait a minute, so the 2 rak'ah of Fajr are better than everything in the dunya, and the Kaaba is in the dunya, so do I really have to make Hajj? It's like, oh man, that's you're missing the, it's a shame that we've begun to parse speech in that way, right? It's just saying that this is the fadila, this is the favor of praying 2 rak'ah of Fajr. So don't you want to pray 2 rak'ah of Fajr and 4 rak'ah of Dhuhr and 4 rak'ah of Asr and 3 rak'ah of Maghrib and 4 rak'ah of Isha and make Hajj? You see, I don't know, man.
It's a shift. It's a shift of the cognitive frame, is what you're saying. That's what you're saying.
You use the technical jargon and not me this time, but yeah, it's shifting the way that you engage and interface with religious speech. It's not. We need a class, man. Somebody needs to teach the class. We need a class.
Yeah, maybe we'll start you. We'll start you teaching that class, inshallah.
No.
You heard it here first, guys. He said no. All right. But
no, I think you need. I mean, for me, this is just kind of a inchoate, kind of undercooked idea. But we need someone to really go in and to kind of show us how we are to kind of, engage with prophetic speech.
yeah, I would add to everything that you said too, which is beautiful because I know we all get stuck in them, like the details of things to realize like what might be really being said without taking away of anything that's being said from its actual reality. you know?
Exactly.
Uh,
Exactly.
and that's a hard balance for most to discern. But may Allah give us that ability, inshallah. But one way to make it easy for folks and myself that I try to hold on to is like whatever practice in Ramadan, and you let me know what you think, Abid, for real. Like whatever practice in Ramadan that you upkeep beyond Ramadan, that is an indication of God's acceptance for his love and want for you to continue to strive for your salvation.
Yeah,
That's
no, that yeah, no, it's now in that, I think of it as uh, like a boost of sorts. I mean,
yeah, a recharge. I see it as a recharge.
a recharge,
I'm
a
always
boost.
very low right before Ramadan. I'm calling myself out right before. I know some people are like really high. They talk about how the Sahaba used to prepare 6 months beforehand and all that. For me, CD, like being real, like very real, I'm always, subhanAllah, afflicted at my, like, almost outwardly. I feel like I don't know about my state with God, we never know, but outwardly I feel like my state is always the lowest spiritually right before Ramadan, and I'm like barely getting there.
For me, I think of myself as being just submerged in dunya. That's what I think about. I think about myself as being submerged in dunya. And I think that something as demanding, and for us as Muslims, what always amazes me is that this is an act of worship that we think of as fairly simple and even facile. Like, yeah, we fast in the month of Ramadan. But people in other religious communities, that joint is like,
They're like, what?
what? And
Not
I
even
think,
water?
yeah, exactly. You know what I'm saying? And I think we just have to give ourselves. I mean, not boasting or in this kind of triumphalist. No, but I'm always very proud of the Muslim community. This is, I mean, you have people that deem themselves practicing Catholics that don't do Lent. Like, give up my coffee. Are you kidding me? I mean, I love the Lord, but come on, we're talking about Godiva chocolate here. I mean, so the fact that you have, the fact that you have Muslims that, would deem themselves only mildly practicing. Dude, this is like, just pause. You have Muslims that like, it's like,
That's
are
extremely
you,
profound. That's
are
extremely.
you, it's like, it's Muslims that, and this is like, I think a sign of a goodness that remains in our tradition. You have Muslims, bro, that if you were to ask them, do you consider yourself like mutadayyin, multazim, like serious about your religion? No, I mean, I'm just not really. But every year for 30 days, I do go without eating for about 15 or 16 hours a day. It's like people would be like, what? Just like, it's like, huh? Like, are you kidding me? Are you, what I'm saying? It's like, are you serious about your religion? Nah, not that much. But, I do go without eating and drinking every day for about 30 days every year. I've been doing that for about 25, 30 years. But I'm really not that serious about this religious stuff. It's like,
That's real, man.
no, I mean, this is an extremely demanding religious act. I mean, I've heard non-Muslim religious commentators describe Ramadan as ascetic. Like, this is a mainstream religious uh, act, but it's an ascetic act. This is, like for a lot of people, this is like what monks and anchorites and hermits do, stuff like this, going like 30-day fast. And so my point mentioning that is, Ramadan is not supposed to be something that we do all the time, right? It's not supposed to be something we do all the time. The Prophet ﷺ, sometimes he ate and sometimes he fasted, right? It's not supposed to be something we do all the time. Although, people say Imam an-Nawawi fasted every day. La ilaha illallah. So that's when people, you read his manaqib, that's something that's mentioned. uh, which is it's strange that you would mention that as manaqib, but that's another thing. My point is that for me, Ramadan is about regaining uh, equilibrium, and it takes. I'm so submerged in dunya. I'm so subservient to my desires, starting with food. I mean, just to live in a place where I can access food as easily and readily as I do is, I mean, it's almost uh, paradisiacal. It's almost, some our experience, some of us, our experience with food is almost heavenly, bro. You have some people that have so much food in their homes and they keep their food so well stocked that just thinking about something, it's just they can just reach and just grab it, just go into the refrigerator, just it's almost like um this is the level of just subservience to my nafs. So like, oh, I want chocolate. Oh, let me get some. Oh, I want one dietitian told me one of the best diets they ever prescribed for anybody. You can eat whatever you want, just make it from scratch. And he said people will eat a lot less. And you actually had to peel potato.
I'll probably end up eating nothing.
If you had to peel potatoes to eat French fries, I don't want them that bad. Yeah. But when you can just drive through a window, I mean, sometimes I think, what would one of the Sahaba say about like a drive-through? They saw a person, let alone the car, right? But just the drive-through, that a person just literally just drove up to a place, cooked food came out of a window, they grabbed it and drove off. It's like, yo, in a context like that, how can you discipline your nafs? Like, what discipline of your nafs? I mean, really? And so I think, Ramadan just helps to provide some equilibrium. You know what I'm saying? It just provides some equilibrium. But we usually show how well we've embraced the equilibrium by gorging incessantly on Eid al-Fitr. So kulu washrabu wa la tusrifu, eat and drink, but not to an excess. But Allah Ghafoor, Allah Ghafoor, Allah Ghafoor. وَخُلِقَ الْإِنسَانُ ضَعِيفًا. Human beings have been created weak, and we just do our best, man. That's exactly good thing we have a merciful Lord, man. Good thing we have a merciful Lord. Good thing we have a merciful Lord.
Yeah, so what we'll do now is like move on to some questions for the audience, inshallah, from the audience. But what I will say is that, this class, this course is it's mercy, forgiveness, emancipation. We covered mercy and forgiveness. We're covering emancipation today. Next Tuesday we'll be covering. And Ubayd's looking at me like, what? But next Tuesday we'll be covering a continuation to emancipation from the lens of Laylatul Qadr, and then what we actually do in Eid, inshallah. Inshallah. And then after that class, I believe that next Tuesday we might be still celebrating Eid or not, but we inshallah resume to our usual purification of the heart class, depending on when Eid lands and when Ramadan ends and when Sidi Ubayd needs a break for a little bit or doesn't, but we'll see how it goes.
We can say that right now.
It does need a break. He does need a break. I figured anyways. That's why I threw it out. Inshallah, next week we will continue in that lens. I just want to put it out for everyone. So let's see what questions we got here real quick. And for those of you that are on Facebook asking questions, if admin can put them here in the chat or in the QA, because I'm only on the Zoom, inshallah. Let's see what we got. All right, so we got a question. MashaAllah, admin was already doing it. Facebook. They said, what does the term beatific vision mean from an Islamic perspective? Question mark. Is that Should I continue for it, or you got it?
Bismillah. No, no, go ahead, go ahead, go ahead.
Let me know. Okay. Is that more of a Christian concept? Question mark. I have heard people say that we should pray to behold the beatific vision to see God in the next life.
Mm. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. You know, I was actually was saying this um, on our, you know, last call, or you know, during the last class, that you know, in terms of our religious terms, we are deeply indebted to the Christian community because they're a longest standing English speaking, American English speaking religious community. And so a lot of terms that we take and just plug in, we might not be as aware of the very specific kind of theological dimensions of those terms. And beatific vision is one such term. Um, the best, and I don't know him well, I wish I knew him better, but I do understand he's part of the Tetlif kind of family, is Dr. Ali Atai,
No,
right?
yeah,
From the Bay Area.
I remember.
He's a phenomenal scholar of comparative religion, you know, a phenomenal scholar of comparative religion. And I just recall him saying, I wish I was more studious because I would have looked into it myself. But I just recalled him saying once, I was talking to him, and he said, you know, there Muslims should be, we should just call it the ru'ya. We should say ru'ya. We should say ru'ya and just familiarize Muslims with the term ru'ya. We should say ru'ya, the vision, right? Because beatific vision has some very specific Christian theological dimensions that might be problematic for some different schools of Islamic theology. And I think he was speaking mostly from an Ash'ari perspective himself. That said, the ru'ya, refers to a seeing, right? It refers to a seeing. It refers to a vision of a kind. And it's something that the believers should aspire to. It is the greatest delight and the highest um, 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 reward of paradise is the ru'ya, is the vision. Now, I'm not even going there, Ali, because it's not my field of expertise. The knowledge that I have of the differences of opinion is quite broad, right? Some people want to say the ru'ya is not physical, which is what I think Ali was referring to, because God is not a physical thing, right? Right. Whereas the beatific vision is actually very physical. That's what I think Ali was referring to. Some people say the ru'ya is something that we behold with the eye of the heart. Then of course, you have traditionalists, Hanabila, folks that say, no, the ru'ya is physical, but it's in a manner that befits the majesty of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? It's not in any manner that is not befitting. Yutabiqu bi jalali. It's in accordance with His majesty. For me, going back to how we countenance religious speech, you see, this is where it's good to be a simpleton like me. What I take from the ru'ya is that people in paradise will be granted, some people in paradise will be granted an experience of the divine that is absolutely unprecedented for any beings that exist. And it will be, and that experience is termed a ru'ya, a viewing. Is it a viewing like you view something physical, or a viewing because it will be, you will be so close to divinity, right? That it will be almost as if you are beholding. Those technical details somehow, if I can, and I don't want to, I don't want to sound like I'm above 1,200 years of theological disputation, because I'm not. But if I can say, it just doesn't, those differences just don't interest me that much, bro. I'm not that interested I'm just not that interested. I know that it's something to aspire to. And I know that it's an experience of the divine in terms of its closeness that is unprecedented for any beings that exist.
No.
And that's the ru'ya. That's the ru'ya.
We got, mashallah, a lot of questions coming our way. I just want to keep our mind on time as well. And time here is 17 minutes after the hour. Let's take maybe one or two more. Sidi Ubaid, what do you think? And then we'll conclude.
Bismillah, Bismillah. I'm here for. Last week, man, I tried to run before suhoor, so I was eviscerated. But I tell you, it's just like and the killing thing, Ali, when I was a bit younger, okay, man, I used to keep my same exercise regime, play basketball, everything. It was now it's like, obey. You're not a spring chicken, kid. You better sit down and read the Mus'haf, man, and chase your children up and down the stairs. And that'll be exercise. So I'm learning my limitations, man.
I used to have 2-a-day practices, and just be fine throughout the day. Now I'm just.
Well, I mean, I don't think it would be that strenuous to do 2-a-day practices on the chess team, man, in the chess club.
Oh, on the gym.
Yeah, man.
That was good.
Yeah. I mean, 2-a-days.
Hey, that's a lot of brain power. See,
yeah, 2-a-days, 3-a-days in the bridge club, 3-a-days in the pinochle club. That's not that strenuous.
Just watch out after this pandemic, bro. We're getting on the court.
Come on, man. I both of your legs working. That's the first thing I want to.
All right, so I think we touched on this a little bit, but it might be good just to re-emphasize because there's a question by an attendee. How do you recommend reverts approach the idea of their non-Muslim family members' eternal fate? I pray every day for my family's conversion, but how can I hope that they will be spared the hellfire? ?
I would say by holding out that hope and praying for them every day. And recognizing that when someone passes, anybody passes, they have passed into the hands of the Arhamar Rahimin, the most merciful of those who show mercy. And the promise that there will be no injustice, there will be no bullying, no one will be wronged, right? Allah does not wrong anyone. وَلَا يَظْلِمُ رَبُّكَ أَحَدًا. Allah does not wrong anyone. And being absolutely convinced of the mercy of God. Like, I think for us as, converts, reverts, this mas'ala, this issue, this question about non-Muslim relatives, it really just helps us to reaffirm our conviction in God's mercy. That if there's any mitigating circumstance, if there's any mercy to be shown, if there's any exculpatory, I'm using all kind of crazy words, man. I'm out here crazy right now. But if there's any excuse to be made, if there's any mercy to be shown, if there's any circumstance that would dictate their being shown mercy, nobody can bring that forward like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Nobody, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Al-Hannan, the maternally compassionate, the maternally warm and merciful. So what I think about is that no one can show mercy to my relatives like Allah. Not me, not anyone else. So that if I were going to have anyone judge anyone that I loved, I want it to be Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because no one can show mercy like that. No one. And that's what I think about.
All right. well, I think we'll take one more.
Hmm.
What could be the reason we downplay the presence of faith in ourselves that despite being able to fast regularly, we are convinced psychologically or more so despaired that we don't take our religion seriously?
So I think there's a few answers. One,
It just continues to say, is there a way possibly or a solution to change that mindset? Right?
well, I think there's a few answers to that. Some good and some bad. I think the good thing is that we have the mir'ah, we have the mirror of the Prophet والسلام, and the Sahaba and the awliya, those men and women, the friends of God. So often when we talk about seriousness about the religion, we're thinking like, I'm not one of those people. I'm not like, some people say that, but I would even say that, we mean out of great humility, kind of like, I'm not any arif billah. I'm no, I try to make my prayers and pay my zakat, but I'm certainly no, fill in the blank, right? Usually it's grandma. When I think about most people, they talk about the most pious person they know. They're like, I try to pray my prayers, but I'm not my grandmother. I'm not my mom, right? Models of piety, right? That I understand. That's motivated by humility. The more disturbing, I think, answer to that question is that we live in an identity driven world. You see what I'm saying? So
Mm.
that being religious is not about conviction and devotion. It's about a certain identity, right? And let's face it, religious people um, don't always represent that. If that is a distinct social type, it's not well represented by religious people broadly. So you find lots of people in different religious communities that, in saying that they're not one of the religious people, what they're really saying is, I'm not a part of that corrupt, twisted religious establishment. You know what I'm saying? But I'm just a faithful person. I'm not one of those, and I think that's problematic on many levels. Some of it is, we don't want to use sultan about, our scholars and people that, we look to provide religious support and examples. The other thing is for people who are seen as, a part of that religious people group, we should feel some responsibility. You know what I'm saying? Because the last thing you want to be is a fitna for the believers. You don't want to be a fitna for the believers. That when people think about being religious or being more serious about their faith, they think about you and they think, man, hell no. And be a closed-minded, judgmental jerk. No, I'd rather just say I'm not that religious. You know what I'm saying? Um, the other thing, about that too, about the identity pieces, I think some of that we have to relax a little bit and just get back to a pure place of worshiping God. I don't know why this was so meaningful to me, and I'll close with this. I was once in Egypt. I was in Cairo, and I was on a bus. I was traveling from Maidan Ibn Hakam. For those of you who know Cairo, uh, man, Cairo is for me. I mean, I was there, on and off for about 5 years. So for me, it's a hometown. I land in Cairo, get a whiff of that smog. Before the taxis had meters, taxi drivers rushing to me trying to cheat me. Oh man, I'm home, baby. You know what I mean? Like, it was just reassuring the talawuf, and the rish, yeah, you know what I'm saying? The pollution and the malfeasance. I'm home, baby. You know what I'm saying? And but I love Egypt, and Egyptians taught me so much. Not just my teachers, but just people that I met in the streets. And this was one such occasion. I was on this bus, and I was traveling from Maidan ibn Hakam, which is in an area of town called Hilmiyat Zaytun, where I was living, and I was going past Abbasiyya to Darasa, which is where one of my teacher in Quran, he lived there. And I got on this bus, and I was sitting there. Bismillah. Hold on. Okay, I got on this bus, and I was sitting there, and I looked across, and I saw this 20-something woman, I'm guessing, and there was nothing about her that would suggest that she was religious in like an identitarian's definition of religious, like in terms of how she dressed, or having this very pronounced kind of commitment to like modesty or something. Like, there was nothing about her that suggests like she was religious, but she was making a wird. She was reading a liturgy. Just saying the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with a sibha, with some dhikr beads, and looking out of the window. And I remember thinking to myself, I just caught a glance of her out the corner of my eye, that it's the morning. It was early in the morning. It was like maybe 7 a.m. in the summer. That what I thought, and I could totally be projecting. It was just my projection. I didn't even talk to this woman. But it felt to me like my religious perspective was dominated by like identity. Like, even in that moment, I thought about myself as like a talibul ilm, on my way to see my teacher on the ancient path of knowledge, or some overblown, overwrought. Hold on one second, guys, please. I thought of myself as like, I'm a talibul ilm, I'm a seeker of knowledge, going to sit with my teacher to engage in this ancient act of talaqi, of learning one-to-one, and blah 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 blah. And it was just like, you watch too many autobiographical movies and read too many autobiographies. And then I looked at her, and I didn't see any of that. I just saw somebody that was remembering God. You know what I'm saying? No, just. And in that moment, I just kind of juxtaposed my state to hers, that I was kind of like wearing this religious identity, like I'm a religious person. And the West forces us into those kinds of articulations of who we are. You know what I'm saying? And I saw her as just like, I don't know what I am. I don't know if I'm like that, but I know it's the morning. وَصْبَحْنَا وَصْبَحَ الْمُلْكِ لِلَّهِ رَبِّ الْعَالَمِينَ. We have risen, and the entire cosmos has risen for the worship of Allah. And she became something aspirational for me. That, I want to worship Allah like that, man. Just, it's not so much about like, am I religious in terms of my identity, but I'm just struggling to submit, trying to worship my Creator, man. That's it, So that's probably a good place to end.
Yeah, that's a beautiful place to end, mashallah. Inshallah, we'll pick back up next week. We'll be talking about the night of power and the day of Eid, which is something, inshallah, we all will be witnessing very soon, hopefully. Thank you all for joining. Thank you all for being here. Ustad Ubaydullah, thank you for everything, mashallah. God bless you. Keep Allah in prayers as you all break your fast. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.